Hey, John.
Hey, Nick.
John,
It looks like it's a little warm there by your lake.
it really is. It's a scorcher. So this week, apparently, well, today we're up into the high 20s, which means nothing to our American cousins.
It
But
means you're below freezing, but yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
And we may be getting up to the low 30s by the end of the week, which I think in Oklahoma's treated as a pleasant spring day.
That's in July, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Again, the 4th of July put me into shock. I got all sorts of burns on my arms and stuff. It was a big day outside on July 4th, and yeah, it's Oklahoma in July. What do you say? It's cooler than Texas.
Have you been tidying up your shed?
Uh, I've been stacking the boxes and moving them around. I got a new air conditioner here. You can see
Oh, nice.
my box. An air conditioner failed us just as the summer started, so we had to get another window air conditioner. So that's the box is here in the shed with me. Yeah, the shed. It's nice in the shed. It's still relatively early in the day. The sun hasn't started to really beat on us here, so we're only at about 100 degrees inside the shed. But I did come from from services this morning. I've got my albedoed white dress shirt. My wife is not happy that I'm in the shed in a dress shirt.
So this is Prisoner of Azkaban. So this is the albedo of the series after the Negretto of Order of the Phoenix. Is that right?
Okay, you just said it's Prisoner of Azkaban, which means that you're drawing some connection here. But yeah, it is Half-Blood Prince. And that's Half-Blood Prince is the albedo works. Why it's so wet, in the entire series. It's all ablutionary. And Harry, of course, has his real baptism in the Inferi Lake. This is wow. How do you get this? I mean, Rowling herself talks about the 6th book as being really unusual in being. Well, should we tell people what we're doing first here? I'm jumping right into this. I mean, the reason we're in a lake in a shed here that Nick is out sweltering by that lake in Wales, and I am here, in my climate-controlled shed, is because of Rowling's metaphor about how she writes. That she talks about how she goes through the trees of her daily life to arrive at a spot where there's a beautiful lake, and the lady in the lake, or the creature in the lake, presents her with story stuff, inspiration for her work. And she describes that lake. It's a wonderful Freudian thing, the water there being her unconscious mind. And it's her unresolved crises, it's her core beliefs, it's her life experiences. They give her the story stuff. And she takes that molten glass, she said something like molten glass, into the shed, and she pounds that into story using her traditional tools. She uses her literary alchemy, she uses her ring composition, she uses her soul allegories, she uses, that's a whole nother book, but she uses the tools inside the shed to raise them up from her individual story of her subconscious mind to her archetypal stories that are beloved throughout the world, not just her Mary Sue story. And so, in honor of her 60th birthday, her Kanreki in Japan, her second birth, she enters a new cycle of life. Nick is the lake, clearly. He's the man who knows the biography stuff. And I'm the shed master. I'm the guy who's been trying to explain why people love her work as much as they do since 2002. That's the impetus of what we're doing here. And we're going book by book, and we've arrived at Half-Blood Prince, not Prisoner of Azkaban. And Half-Blood Prince is a really unusual book because Rowling said that so much of what happens in book 6 relates to book 7 that I feel almost as though they are two halves of the same novel. And that's really important about how Half-Blood Prince ends. She says so much that happens in 6 relates to what happens in 7, and you really sort of skid off the end of 6 straight into 7 it's not the discrete adventure that the others have all been. And it's oh well, and she had to, she also related that Chamber of Secrets was originally titled Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. But she decided to move that stuff way, way off towards the end in terms of the way she was going to reveal what the story was really about. So this is a weird book, Nick. What is going on in Rowling's life when this happens?
So she is giving birth to her son, David. So she's now got 3 children. She is in a very comfortable suburb of Edinburgh, not the same one yet that she's currently living in. She has her own security organization. So when she goes to events, as well as the event security, she has her own security team. She's very well protected. She's not giving a lot of interviews. At this point now, she has the end in sight. So she's on the final run to get through to book 7. Her charitable organization is now organized. So she has a Valant charity named after her mother, who are looking after her day-to-day charitable giving with a special focus on poverty and single parent families within Scotland. And she's just starting to grow into her woman of power that she will become.
The book is dedicated to Mackenzie, but I think you're right that she says that she put off her organization of her final review of the structure of the book and the actual writing of it because David had just been born.
Yes.
But it's funny because she dedicates it to Mackenzie and says this is your ink and paper twin. But oh well, I don't know. That was just something to make Mackenzie feel better because she was being neglected both by the baby and the book.
Well, I think, and of course, there's some gap between manuscript finishing and actual delivery at the publishers. So I think if we take from conception to birth, that was the period where the meat of this book was written.
Yeah, I'm just thinking too. Her daughter Mackenzie was 2 years old at that point.
Yeah.
She could have some idea of what it meant to have a book dedicated to you.
Yeah.
David wouldn't.
No.
This is a wasted dedication. David comes up, I think, in Deathly Hallows. Yeah. So, what's my Lake moment here, Nick? What's my
Okay, so this is Half-Blood Prince. So the Lake inspiration for Rowling is going to be the Half-Blood Prince, Severus Snape, and the person that inspired this character. So it's quite rare where we can actually put a name, although Rowling hasn't specifically said, yes, this is my inspiration. Actually, after Hallows was published, she said, if you'd seen my grades in chemistry, that's why Snape teaches potions. And then there's a reaction from the crowd. Don't say, "Aw, he deserved it." We can all think of teachers we'd like revenge on. So who is this horrible, this nasty teacher that Rowling is taking revenge on? Well, don't forget that this horrible, nasty Snape, Harry Potter names his son after the bravest man I ever knew. Well, this man was called John Nettleship. And physically, if nothing else, physically, he is almost a carbon copy of the description of Snape in the book. So he is tall. He is almost painfully thin. He has an incredibly white complexion. He has a bulbous nose. He has a thin, angular face. Certainly at the time he was teaching Rowling, when he was in his 30s, again, correct for book Snape, he had long black curtains of hair, which pupils have described as often being greasy. If I'm going to share a remarkable article written by a friend of his.
Yeah, he had quite the
shortly after he died.
fan.
Yeah, he really did. He's and you can look at the photographs and you'll see what I mean. If we compare Rowling's line drawings to John Nettleship, there's no doubt that at least physically he's an inspiration. He was a chemistry teacher at Wydean Comprehensive School. Now, I don't know for how long Jo studied chemistry. So it's a compulsory subject for the first 3 years. And then you select from all your subjects what you're going to study for your O level. So that's the Muggle world equivalent of owls. So Jo would have selected 8 or 9 subjects to go for O level. She would have had the opportunity to drop chemistry. She'd have been strongly encouraged to have at least one science, but she could have dropped chemistry at that point. Then in the 6th form, where you study your A levels, that's the Muggle world equivalent of Newts, you select 3, sometimes 4 subjects. Now, certainly Rowling would not have studied A-level chemistry. So possibly 5, more probably, given that she claims to have got really poor marks in chemistry, more likely she only studied it for 3 years. So she would have known John for a maximum of 3 years.
Nick, I'm going to interrupt.
Yeah.
Nettleship, maybe you're going to talk about this, forgive me, but
yeah.
doesn't Nettleship eat lunch with Anne Rowling at the school?
So I think for any young child, and we're talking if it's for the first 3 years of Jo's secondary education, 11, 12, 13-year-old girl, I can think of no worse nightmare than your mother regularly socializing with one of your teachers. This has to have an impact on how John was viewed by Jo. But yes, you're quite right. So he was, as well as the chemistry teacher, he was actually the head of science in Wydean, which means he was responsible for recruiting Anne Rowling as a laboratory technician. And at least according to the article that his friend published, she was a laboratory technician for biology. So not directly working with John, but within John's department. Now, laboratory technician is a technical job. So this would require setting up apparatus and equipment, looking after apparatus and equipment, and generally assisting the teachers. We know that Anne would have at least some technical competence, because when she fell pregnant with Jo, she was actually up in Scotland training to be a flight line technician for the Royal Navy, which was the most technically skilled role that was available for women in the Royal Navy at that time. She was also she had developed MS by this point, and it was beginning to affect her mobility. It was John Nettleship, actually, that managed to move the school to construct a lavatory, a WC, in the science block, so that Anne didn't have to walk across to the main building whenever she had to use the lavatory. Yes, they from testimony appeared to be very friendly, and certainly it was an extremely good turn for the Rowling household to take a chance on Anne, who didn't appear to have any regular employment prior to that, other than that brief time with the Royal Navy. But he was a remarkable man. Those striking physical characteristics, that white skin and the painfully thin body. So he had a mild childhood polio. He was incredibly weak, to the point that he could hardly kick a ball when he was a boy. But he has been described by almost all his teachers as an extremely enthusiastic, flamboyant teacher. So cast your minds back to Philosopher's Stone, and that dramatic entrance of Snape, telling the kids that he could teach them how to put a stopper into death. And I can certainly imagine John doing this, but by his own admission, he could be extremely short-tempered. He could be certainly at the point that he was teaching Jo, he was not well. He was suffering from insomnia, and in his own reflection, he could react inappropriately, aggressively, or just ignore, depending upon at which point of days he was in. John was probably the last person within his social circle and the school at Wydean to recognize that he was Snape. He didn't see it at all. And certainly initially, I don't think he took it well. So his own self-image was not of this cruel bully of a teacher that Snape is, because, it's not until really the last book we discover what some of his finer motivations, Snape's finer motivations, are. But as he grew into being recognized within the fandom as the inspiration, he really leaned into it. So he would dress up as Snape. He published a book. He used to take people on Harry Potter tours in and around Chepstow. And
anybody that has been on that tour, and anybody that has a copy of that book, please contact us, because we have there's no extant copies that we know of, right?
No, I can't seem to put my hand on it. Although I am on Able Books almost every day looking for a secondhand copy to turn up from somewhere.
What's it called? What's the title of it? It's something in Chepstow, right?
Yes. Yeah, I will remind myself, and I'll put it in the show notes for this episode. But I think he died shortly after the final book was written, 2010 or 2011, and he seems to have gone out of the fandom's consciousness after that point. But I think he's an extremely interesting character. He seems to be very passionate about his career in teaching. Really an inspirational person that I think we ought to know more about.
Well, forgive me for assuming to know anything about the lake. I try to stay. I'm a hydrophobe. I don't want to go near the lake. But is he the only person reflected inside the stories that has embraced the role and written about it, rather than just kind of shrug it off?
So there are some people that I think have much weaker claims to be inspirations that definitely lean into it, I think, more than is really deserved. So the German translator for the Harry Potter books claims to be Rufus Scrimgeour. Yes, I'm less than convinced that there are.
I want Sean Harris to show up with a red-haired wig and or Lucy Shepherd to show up,
Yeah.
as a cat. She's transitioned to a cat. I mean, that would be a person of note, leaning into it.
Well,
But
we've
as a
had,
rule, those people all just step back and disappear into
yeah,
the story.
we've had Rowling's American cousin, one of his American cousins, dressed up in school uniform and little round glasses at an age that I don't think is appropriate. Um, but yeah, uh,
That didn't go over very well with the presence.
I can imagine not, but it's been met pretty much with stony silence.
Yeah, it's oh well. John Nettleship is a fascinating character. His tragic death before anybody in Potter punditry really had reached him. The fandom, he had a group of women that
Yeah.
corresponded with him almost every day, especially during his protracted illness. Anyway, it's in that way it had a happy ending, kind of, except for the sadness of his death. But anyway, that is a great connection, especially in that he was a friend of Anne Villant Rowling's.
Yeah.
Really a help to her and the family. Rowling has said how much she didn't like chemistry, and yet, as you point out, Snape is the anti-hero hero of the story. The sadist protagonist in the background that basically protects and saves Harry's life multiple times throughout the series.
I do wonder how many male children there are in Chepstow and the surroundings who've got the middle name John, because they were named after the bravest chemistry teacher their fathers ever knew.
Maybe. That that was a good one. I'm not sure how I top that.
What's in the shed, John?
Yeah. I was looking through my notes for this one, and I found a talk I gave soon after I moved to Oklahoma called 10 Things You Didn't Know About Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. And any one of those 10 things would be great. There's all sorts of stuff. There's the broken story formula. There's Chamber of Secrets all over again. Ring composition takes on a whole new dimension, and you have a double beginning and a double middle and a double finish. It's just like it's got two rings inside of it. The literary alchemy, it's the albedo, it's the white book. The thing I was really leaning towards was talking about Irma Pince, talking about the Half-Blood Prince, and Filch. Snape is a half vampire, and the witness protection thing. Dumbledore in the tower says to Draco that we've done this before. We can protect your whole family. And the question is, who did they do this before? They did it with Irma Pince, because if you take Irma Pince's name and you move the R from the second letter of her first name to the second letter of her second name, it becomes I'm a prince. And that she is Snape's mother. And Filch is his father, also in witness protection. And so that always the rumor about Irma and Filch being married, it's a great thing. I was going to go there for the story, but that's pretty thin considering all the stuff that happens there. There's the incredible Vanity Fair House of Gaunt thing, which really plays up what we learn inside the Pensieve in this book. There's the setting artistry. There's the Inferi Lake. I mean, I wrote a whole chapter in this and how Harry cast his spell on the symbolism of the Inferi Lake. And if you need to buy that book. If you haven't bought that book, here we go. How Harry cast his spell. The astronomy tower, and how this transitions to Deathly Hallows. And that's very much like the beginning. So I had 2 of the 10 things were about the story formula. And I haven't talked about the story formula throughout this series. And we're getting near the end. If I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? And something that I identified after reading the 4th book during that 3-year summer before we got Order of the Phoenix was that every one of the books followed the same journey. the same travel, and there's 10 distinct points. You can make it 11 if you want. We start off at Privet Drive, home sweet home. We have a magical escape, the intrusion of the magical world into profane existence, and the adventure begins. The Dursleys show up in their car. They come down the fireplace. There's an intrusion from this crazy inner world into the exterior Muggle existence. Bang, out we go. We wind up at Hogwarts. We get the mystery. We basically get Nancy Drew and the two Hardy Boys underneath the invisibility cloak out at midnight, trying to figure something out every year. And then this mystery comes to a head. That's the crisis. That's the fourth point. And Harry chooses to do the right, difficult things. This is saving people thing. Harry is on it. And we go underground. Harry and one or both of his two friends go underground to confront the evil to be overcome. And we have a fight. Harry either is going toe-to-toe with the Dark Lord himself, or is his shadow self, or a Death Eater or two, or 8 or whatever. We're in the Department of Mysteries. And that fight, Harry loses. Harry loses every single year and seems to die. And then he rises from the dead in the presence of a symbol of Christ. We talked about Chamber of Secrets about this, where Harry's every man, and he dies from his sin, and the suffering Christ, the weeping Christ figure, the resurrection bird saves him. And then we have the Dumbledore Denouement. The headmaster explains what happened that Harry missed in the story, usually about a good person, a seemingly good person, turning out to be a bad person, and the bad person turning it out to be the good person. And the last aspect, Harry winds up at King's Cross. He rides the Hogwarts Express back to the conjunction of his magical and Muggle lives. This works for every novel until we get to, you could say, Goblet of Fire, because it starts off in Little Hangleton.
Yeah.
But it's really happening inside Harry's head. That chapter is Harry's right there. Harry's witnessing it through Nagini's eyes, and so we're sort of on Privet Drive there, even when we're not on Privet Drive. The opening of Half-Blood Prince. No, we're not getting that at all. We're at 10 Downing Street. Harry's not there. Any shape or form, Harry is not there. And that meeting in 10 Downing Street between the Muggle Prime Minister, is that John Major, Nick?
No, it wouldn't have been John Major. It would have been Gordon Brown.
Okay. Well, and he meets with the former Minister of Magic.
Yeah.
And then we segue not to Privet Drive. We still don't wind up at Privet Drive. We wind up at Spinner's End, in that, in the Unbreakable Vow scene with Severus Snape, and his cousins. Now that cousins, and that, and finally we wind up at Privet Drive, and Dumbledore's arrival to pick Harry up, and we go off to meet the potions master, whose name I'm forgetting. Oh, how embarrassing. I've said Cornelius Fudge, and now I have Fudge brain. And you said Rufus Scrimgeour earlier, so I've got to get those two names. Anyway, go ahead and edit that out, Nick.
Yep.
They go on. Dumbledore comes by to pick Harry up, and they go off to meet the elusive potion master from Slytherin, who wants some crystallized pineapple. That beginning to Half-Blood Prince is so unusual.
Yeah.
It's an absolute departure from formula. Now, it's critical to setting up, as I said earlier, that double ring composition that happens inside the story. And again, read the ring composition book if you want to really get the gritty details of how Rowling brilliantly creates two beginning, middles, and ends in that circle. But after we get to Privet Drive, okay, we have our magical escape as the headmaster makes his house call. Our primary mystery is introduced before we get to Hogwarts, namely, what is Draco up to? The crisis comes to a head. Trelawney's revelations that Draco is elated about something and that Snape overheard the prophecy. And Harry immediately heads underground on a Horcrux hunt. Okay? He goes spelunking into the Inferi Cave and fights for his life there with the living dead before returning to Hogsmeade and then Hogwarts to fight the Death Eater invaders. Dumbledore dies. Ouch! Sorry if I spoiled that for anybody. And Harry has... We put out a book before Deathly Hallows called Who Killed Albus Dumbledore? Yeah. And if you go to the Amazon page for that book, you'll see people who just recently have written the comments. Well, thank you for spoiling the hey, it's been 15 years.
But 500 million copies.
Okay. Dumbledore dies. Sorry. And Harry has his annual, surely he would die of this agony before being saved in the presence of a symbol of Christ, the Hippogriff and or the Half-Blood Prince. I would, I'd take that back even further and say that Harry rises from the dead in the symbol of Christ with Dumbledore in the cave. I mean, he dies in that lake. Anyway, the formula breaks down at the beginning and at the end. The two violations of the journey formula happen at the end of Half-Blood Prince. We don't get our meeting with Dumbledore. Dumbledore skips out. He has to attend his own funeral. He's not there to talk with Harry, right? And we don't go to the King's Cross station. I mean, and what's funny about this? I mean, Rowling saying before the finale that book 6 and 7 slide together at the end into one story. We make up for the absence of Dumbledore at the end of Half-Blood Prince by having him appear twice to talk to Harry at the end of Deathly Hallows, right? He appears at King's Cross, and he appears, kind of in, just before the epilogue in his own office. And we don't go to King's Cross Station at the end of Half-Blood Prince. Well, we go there twice. We go there for Harry's meeting with Dumbledore, and we go there for the epilogue. So, we make up for it. We get 2 Dumbledore denouement scenes and 2 trips to King's Cross. People have complained about when I give these talks and I talk about the story formula, hey, Privet Drive, and we just walk through the whole thing. There's a mystery, there's a crisis, they go underground, they do all these things. People will say, gosh, that makes it sound like it's some sort of formula. That it's just she's just checking boxes. And I'm like, this is a real departure from Hero's Journey. We call it a Harry's Journey for a reason. This is anything but some sort of scripting cookie cutter. The story is a partial throwback to the heroes of old, namely Odysseus, Aeneas, and Dante. But these stories all take a different turn. In the ancient and medieval epics, the heroes travel to the underworld to confront death, usually for information, entering and exiting without a trial much greater than the difficulties of the trip and the shock of what they see. But that's not what happened in Harry Potter. When Harry goes underground, he dies. Okay? In Sorcerer's Stone, Harry expires knowing all was lost and fell into blackness, down, down, down. In Chamber of Secrets, Harry is poisoned by the basilisk. Harry slid down the wall. He gripped the fang that was spreading poison through his body and wrenched it out of his arm, but he knew it was too late. "You're dead, Harry Potter," said Riddle's voice above him. Not especially subtle, right? Prisoner of Azkaban. A pair of strong, clammy hands suddenly attached themselves around Harry's neck. They were forcing his face upward. He could feel its putrid breath. His mother was screaming in his ears. She was going to be the last thing he ever heard. And when released, Harry felt the last of his strength leave him, and his head hit the ground. In Goblet of Fire, Rowling places Harry's seemingly hopeless battle with the risen Voldemort in a graveyard. So Harry is not only on an almost certain collision, of course, with death, and Cedric does die, he's also already among the dead. in those chapters. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry is possessed by Voldemort to get Dumbledore to kill the boy. And then Harry's scar burst open. He knew he was dead. It was pain beyond imagining, pain past endurance. He knew he was dead. In Half-Blood Prince, the story we're talking about, right, the Inferi from the Cavern Lake grab Harry and begin to carry him into the Stygian depths. He knew there would be no release, that he would be drowned and become one more dead guardian of a fragment of Voldemort's shattered soul. That, and then of course in Deathly Hallows, spoiler alert, Harry has a sacrificial death. Harry chooses actually to die. Hit me with that curse there, big guy. Avocadabra me, and he gets it, and he goes to this otherworldly King's Cross. That's a real departure from Hero's formula. Harry actually dies. Doesn't just go to the land of the dead, he dies. But there's not much story there. He rises from the dead. And it's not just a great comeback. Please note that Harry never saves himself, but always is saved by a symbol of Christ or by love. Okay? It's his mother's sacrificial love and the Philosopher's Stone inside the first book. In Chamber of Secrets, it's Fawkes, the Phoenix. In Prisoner of Azkaban, it's the White Stag Patronus. In Goblet of Fire, it's the Phoenix Song. In Order of the Phoenix, it's Harry's love for Sirius, Ron, and Hermione that defeats the Dark Lord. Both Dumbledore and Buckbeak, the Hippogriff, save Harry as Christ figures in Half-Blood Prince. Okay, that he rises after 3 days. Excuse me, in Philosopher's Stone, it's just another obvious reference to the resurrection. So, this is a big departure from standard Joseph Campbell heroes from, or even Vladimir Prop's stuff that was written in the 1920s about fairy tale formula. At the end of Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore is murdered, so there's no denouement with the headmaster, and Harry does not return to King's Cross or the Dursleys. Harry vows that he will not be returning to Hogwarts for his 7th and final year because he has a mission to destroy Horcruxes and vanquish the Dark Lord. Oddly enough, though, even if Harry's Odyssey in Deathly Hallows does not conform to one or two details of Rowling's monomyth formula, it does conform to type on the important points. Harry's adventure does begin on Privet Drive. There is a magic escape featuring 6 of his friends in Deathly Hallows. All through Deathly Hallows, they go underground and they wind up at King's Cross. Okay. The reason I want to bring all this up in terms of King's Cross is really a part of the formula that I didn't talk about in any of the things that I wrote about formula, from Hidden Key to Harry Potter through the Deathly Hallows lectures, the book I wrote on the subject. And that is that when Harry goes underground to confront this his saving people thing, he always winds up at a magical place that isn't anything like the real world. It's otherworldly. Some people say it's alocal and atemporal. There's no there, and there's no when, then. And this, it's the miles beneath Hogwarts in front of the Mirror of Erised with Quirrell-de-Mort there. It's the Chamber of Secrets that everybody has heard exists, but nobody actually believes it happens. Bin says it's just a legend, a stupid legend. We get into the Shrieking Shack. We go to the center of the maze, and we're transported to the Little Hangleton graveyard for an otherworldly experience of a man rising from the dead in a black mass. I mean, this is about as queer a place and time as you can imagine. Half-Blood Prince, Order of the Phoenix, we go to the Department of Mysteries, and really, I've written an entire essay about Harry's adventures and the ring structure of it in the Department of Mystery in the Rowling Library book about the structure of Order of the Phoenix, edited by Ibid. It's really a brilliant collection. And Half-Blood Prince, we get the Inferi Link. which in terms of archetypal images and Dumbledore as a Christ figure, himself rising from the dead and light and warmth rescuing Harry from the dead. Really quite the scene. I am with you, Harry. That moment. And then, of course, Deathly Hallows, he goes to King's Cross, which is Logos land. And I'll talk about that maybe tomorrow or, our next meeting of this thing. We talk about Deathly Hallows. That is the important thing to remember about these things is we go to a place that isn't a place. That's an interior aspect, really, somehow of Harry. And that's where he learns the truth. And it's the the media is the message. The structure is the message in this case, because in chiastic structure, the meaning is always in the middle, the heart of the story. And that middle point, that defining center, that invisible center, which isn't really local, that defines the circle, that's where Harry always goes. And symbolically, that's Harry going to his heart, where he knows everything. I talk about this when we do the Deathly Hallows talk, but Harry, when he's at King's Cross, which again is the definition of the center, right? I mean, that's what a King's Cross is. He's asked by Dumbledore says to him 14 times, "As you know, Harry." And Harry, who is never the sharpest knife in the drawer, he knows everything at King's Cross, just as he finds out something spectacular every year at that point. And this, again, is not formulaic monomyth or cookie cutter storytelling. This is profound symbolism. This is a weave of story in the shed that is, it made it the best-selling story and the most, Nick, this is how you came into Hogwarts Professor, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so Casual Vacancy and the Harry Potter series just blew me away. And I thought, this is not normal literature. There is something to this that I don't understand. I don't understand why these stories are affecting me as powerfully as they are. And the only site that was talking about it was yours, John.
Yeah, and Nick, people know me as the dean of Harry Potter scholars and as J.K. Rowling expert. I don't, that's not how I understand myself. I never got into this to be an expert on one author or one set of books, whatever. My question was from the start, why do people love these books? It's not because the author is especially shy about answering the big human questions in story form, or because she doesn't point to specific enough answers. Okay, every one of the 7 Harry Potter novels, and especially the last, Deathly Hallows, is built on the hero's journey story structure. Okay, but she's given this thing a peculiarly spiritual and undeniably Christian finish in Harry's faux death and resurrection in the presence of, or as himself, as a symbol of Christ. Rowling can do all her ecumenical things and say, I'm not trying to evangelize this and the other thing. But boy, she's writing in the English literary tradition, and that's a Christian tradition. If you talk about the Tibetan literary tradition, it's Buddhist. And Rowling is writing in this thing. Readers don't need to be Christians, of course, to find this ending thrilling and satisfying, or even an image of their greatest hope, victory over death. The greatest human fear is of death, and sharing in Harry's repeated and final victory over an enemy whose name means willing death brings readers back to the stories again and again for the vicarious pleasure of defeating death themselves. In a world largely stripped of the reality and inevitability of death, Harry Potter, a kid's book, tackles the issue head on in every story and gives a profoundly spiritual and specifically Christian answer. Love transcends death and defeats those who worship at death's altars. Those who love sacrificially have hope of a personal resurrection. Whether readers accept this last part or not, this is not an altar call. This is not John reaching out to you to heal. The message of personal immortality and love's victory over death resonates in the human heart as a universal hope and explains in large part the widespread popularity of these books. Okay, now that's that was my answer. The so-called Iliadi thesis that popular fiction serves a religious function in a profane culture. And the stories we love the most, the stories that have this effect that you described, Nick, when you read these books, those are the stories we love the most, and the authors we return to again and again, because they're doing what stories are supposed to do. And if I remember for anything, I want to be remembered as the guy who talked about that, and that Rowling just happened to be the accidental person that walked in. She happened to be the brilliant author that used all of these archetypal and traditional symbols to deliver that message about love's victory over death. Whew,
Wow.
It's getting hot here.
Wow, thank you, John. Well,
seriously, it's that's we're getting near the end.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make sure we talked about that a little bit. What are we going to talk about? What's going to be? What are you going to choose for the whole lake thing about Deathly Hallows?
Do you know, I thought I didn't plan this very well, John, honestly, because I thought that Deathly Hallows is my favorite book. You know, whenever I go on Three Broomsticks, it's a question, which is your favorite book? It's like a passport to get in there. And I always say Deathly Hallows. And it's partly because it really seals and it caps that series so well. I wasn't hankering after book 8 because that finished the series for me in just such a beautiful and profound way. I thought there's so much in there, so much goes on. I'm not going to struggle. I struggled to find a lake example within Deathly Hallows until, and I was reading a piece from Beatrice Groves on Masonic symbolism, and Rowling more or less talks about her lake method, how that subconscious worked on a concrete example. So I'm going to talk about where the lake inspiration for the Deathly Hallows symbol came from, where that inspiration, she believes, entered her subconscious.
That's great. And I'm going to talk about how she took that story stuff and pounded it into, the Deathly Hallows symbol, and how that story, that last book, is largely about a meta-narrative experience where she talks about how to interpret symbols, how to understand story. Because I wrote a book called Harry Potter's Bookshelf, in which it has 4 sections, the 4 levels of reading, and explain how Rowling, you read Rowling at the surface level, the moral level, the allegorical level, and the sublime or the anagogical level. And that Rowling has that symbol, that Deathly Hallows symbol, interpreted at those 4 levels. I'm going to talk about the shed aspect.
I'm excited. That. So we're going to have a complete construct from lake to shed of just one aspect, one example of Rowling's work.
Yeah, but of all the books, really, people say, when people say Deathly Hallows is the favorite book, yes, it is a coherent whole. It has its Negretto, Albedo, Rubetto, magnificent story, the defeat of the Dark Lord. But to me, that always means that you like the series, because that book is absolutely incomprehensible without the rest of the series.
Yeah.
I think it's unfair to say Deathly Hallows. It is the best book of the series because it is the climax of all. It's what all the other was lead to. But to talk about it as a standalone book is silly. It's just even Rowling says 6 and 7 are a coherent whole. We don't finish book 6 until the end of book 7. We get our double Dumbledore meetings and our double trips to Green Cross. That's she intentionally says, hey, this is one long thing. That's why we get the albedo of book 6 goes to the alchemical wedding of Fleur and what is the Weasley brothers' name? What is Sean Harris's brother's name in that story? Do you remember what?
Bill.
Is it just Bill?
It's Bill.
Okay. The marriage of France and England at the beginning of Deathly Hallows takes us right into the Ribetto and the death of Rufus Scrimgeour. We have two red deaths at the end there. All right.
I'm glad that came quicker than Horace Slughorn did to me.
Horace Slughorn. Oh my goodness, there he is. All right. Let's.
I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. So I'll talk to you tomorrow, John.
Great. Take care, Nick.